So last week's, I brought a podcast treat of the weekend, which was wagon wheels. So I gave Rob a couple of wagon wheels. So this week's treat is Twinkies.
Next week better be ding dongs, or I'm going to be.
No, I've already got that something set aside.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, is there a best before date on these?
I bought them last weekend.
No, but is I want to know if there actually is a best before date on them, or if they're just infinitely good.
That's right.
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot. Today, joining me, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
Howdy.
And Mr. Steve Barclay.
Good day, y'all.
You have not been here for a few weeks, sir.
I wasn't here last week.
Well, I don't think you were. They were here the week before. Was he here the week before, Ryan?
I think I was here the week before.
I don't think you were.
Wasn't I here the week before?
What was
I think so.
No, I don't think so. Well, so we talked to Kelly Godot.
Yeah, he wasn't here for that.
And he wasn't here for that. And then I feel like there was the other, and the week before that was when we had to do remotely.
Well, that's right, too. He bailed on that, too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're saying you had a
couple.
couple of high-quality podcasts.
That's right. I'm back down in the dirt today. What have you been up to?
Oh, I've been here, there, and everywhere.
I heard you went fishing.
I did go fishing for a few days, yeah.
Where'd you go, and did you catch anything?
Went to Tunkwa Lake, which is just outside of Logan Lake, BC, about a half hour out of there. Stayed at a place called Tunkwa Lake Resort, which is a really nice little, rustic cabins on the side of a lake, and they've got boat rentals and bike rentals and horseshoe pits and things like that. But it's a man-made lake. They flooded it 40 years ago or something, and it's stocked with rainbow trout, and you can get some nice-sized rainbow trout in there. I saw guys pulling out up to 5-6 pounders, which is a decent size for a rainbow trout. I think the record in that lake is somewhere around 8 pounds. But generally a good lake to fish at. Wasn't great while we were there. I caught 3 that I kept. I've had buddies who've gone up there and walked away with 14 fish a piece or something. Just ridiculous.
Well, good. So now you're all recharged and ready to go for the summer.
Yeah, you know what? Every single time that I go out on a fishing trip like that, I come back less functional than I left. And it's so hard to get your head back around working again afterwards. It's just you get so relaxed, and you get up in the morning in the wee hours, you get out on the lake, you fish for a while, you come back, have a beer or two, have some lunch, have a nap.
Yep.
Go back out in the evening, fish a while, and come back. It's pretty casual.
If you take that routine and just replace the word fish with check our email, I mean, that's me and Ryan's day.
Yeah,
that's right there. We just get check email, have a couple beers.
Hi, siesta. What are you talking about?
Things I don't want to know. Note to self: dock pay.
No.
Yeah.
Note to self: my new job.
Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
What are we doing today?
Today we are talking with Tyler Stephen, who is a longtime Apple and iOS user, as well as a member of the AppleVis editorial team.
Aha! So we're talking some Apple today.
That's right, some Apple smack.
Cool.
Sorry, Apple Mac. Sorry, slip of the tongue.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Well, that's right, because they had their big developers conference a few weeks back.
What conference was that?
You know what conference that is. Okay, first of all, listen, it's not my fault that, a bunch of engineers sit around and they decide, what are we going to call our big Apple event? And they come up with the stupidest name for it. WWDC?
Worldwide Developers Conference.
What is it? WW?
Yes, Worldwide Developers Conference.
Think Wonder Woman.
No, but yeah, okay, that might help me remember. But no, that's, I don't know. Could they not call it Appalooza Fest or
Applepalooza?
Apptastic or Aptasm? or Apple
Appgasm.
Appgasm, anything.
Yeah.
You know, there was many options. They just needed to sit down in a room for 2 hours and they couldn't come up with a better name. So it's not my fault I can't remember their ridiculous acronym. So anyways,
Actually, it totally is your fault.
I don't know. Listen, my brain is just wired that way. I learned that from Kelly Goto. So
That's a problem.
it's not my fault. No. So yeah, they had a big developers conference a few weeks ago, and so we're going to have him on to talk a little bit about that, what some of the announcements were, and just to get his take in general on the state of Apple. All right, well, let's talk some news. So did you guys happen to watch the Tony Awards?
Yep,
Nope.
Did you really? You watched the Tony Awards?
I did, yeah.
Wow.
Well, my wife is a big theater fan, and my daughter's a big theater fan, so I don't actually get a choice in these things.
Well, then I'm sure that you saw this. You saw this momentous occasion that, what do you call it? Is she an actress? I guess
She is an actress in a play, Ali Stroker. And,
Ali Stroker.
Yeah.
she made history as the first wheelchair user to win a Tony.
Yay!
So she won it for Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. She was playing
Ado Annie in the Broadway revival of Oklahoma. And she's 31, and she lost the use of her legs in a car accident when she was only 2 years old. Now, I believe I heard somewhere, I thought I read somewhere, that she on Glee?
I think at one point, I don't know if she was a regular character on Glee, but she was. At
So
some
she
point
appeared on Glee in
Yeah.
some capacity at some point.
Yeah.
They did get a little pushback, though. Some people did note that there was no wheelchair ramp up to the stage, so she wasn't able to actually
sit with her peers and make her way up onto the stage.
That's right. I guess they had put her backstage before the announcement, so that if she won, she could just wheel in from there.
Right.
A lot of people sort of took note of that and complained about it a bit. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't want to take anything away from her moment by complaining about the lack of accessibility options maybe in the theater at that given moment.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of people talk in the last few months anyway about, disabled people playing disabled characters on TV and movies, because that hasn't been the case typically. So she deserves her moment in the spotlight.
Well, in a way, this is even more important because, and I don't know, I've never seen Oklahoma. Has anybody seen Oklahoma?
I have not seen Oklahoma.
Okay. So I don't know. I don't think this character that she's playing in Oklahoma is in a wheelchair.
Well, she didn't get up and walk.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, I don't think in the play, I don't think the character is in a wheelchair. So she's not in a wheelchair playing somebody in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? Like she's actually playing a character that is normally able-bodied in the play. So I think that's even better, because they cast her based on her talents.
Right.
Talent, yeah.
It has nothing to do with the
Boy,
fact
does
that
she
she's
have
in a
voice.
wheelchair.
Holy smokes, does she have a voice? So
Yeah, and that's
they actually did a performance during the Tonys.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, so we got to hear her sing, and she can belt it out, man.
Oh, wow, that's great.
I just looked up her filmography on IMDb just to see what else she's done, and actually she's done a fair number of different shows. She's in Charmed, City Boys, Drunk History,
Really?
Instinct, the TV adaptation of Lethal Weapon, 10 Days in the Valley, Faking It, Cotton, and Glee.
Wow.
Oh, and Rachel Bloom, I Was a Mermaid, and Now I'm a Pop Star.
Cool. You just have to write that show down.
Yeah.
Watching that.
They had you at Mermaid, didn't they?
That's right. No, but this is great. I mean, it's so great to see. Clearly we could have lots to say about the theater not having a ramp. But
Now let's see some blind actors playing some blind people instead of sighted actors playing blind people.
Well, you will actually see some of that later this fall when Apple releases their premiere called C.
That's right. My buddy John is one of the first people to appear in that. He did stunts in that show.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And friend of the show, Mr. Donovan, was
Donovan Till,
a small part in that movie as well.
Yeah.
Wait, is it a movie or is it a series?
I think it's a movie.
Yeah, I think it's a movie.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. Wait, and what is it on?
It'll be Apple's exclusive streaming service this fall. And it's called C.
So I'll never see it.
I'll come over and watch it.
Yeah, well, listen. I mean, I think there's a couple components to this. I mean, yeah, I would love to see, people with disabilities represented on the screen by people with disabilities. But I mean, I'd also love to see just the best person for the part, whether they're blind or they're in a wheelchair. Who cares? Like, this idea that somebody has to be able-bodied in order to perform in a movie or a play or a musical, I would love for that just to go away and just, give everybody an opportunity to show their talents no matter what their condition is. So that's the world I want to live in, boys. Congratulations again to Ali Stroker. Brian, see if you can get her on the show.
Alrighty.
Reach out to her.
Okay.
I'll get you an email. Hey, Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs.
We are the sister company to CanAsTech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Joining us now is Tyler Stephen, who is a team member from the AppleVis editorial team.
Hello.
So we're glad you could join us today. We wanted to talk to somebody from AppleVis about some of the announcements made at WWDC last week, and we're hoping you're the guy.
So, why don't we start off, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do over there at AppleVis?
So AppleVis is a community for blind and visually impaired users of Apple devices. iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple TV, Apple Watch. And of course, with that, robust discussion of third-party apps.
Right.
We have whole directories for iOS, macOS, watchOS, and tvOS, third-party apps and their accessibility. We have the AppleVis podcast, where a person can send in, members of our community send in demonstrations of what they're doing.
Right.
And to show off features or serve as beginners guides. So we have podcasts. We have what's called the AppleVis Extra, which every once in a while someone on the AppleVis editorial team will reach out to app developers and attempt to, if they can have them on for the extra, give recognition, to the community, and also give to the developers, give the community some recognition to them if they've made strides in accessibility. If there's something to be highlighted, that's typically what we do for extras. We did have one recently. It was with two people from Apple, Sarah Herlinger, Apple's Director of Global Accessibility Policy and Initiative, and Dean Hudson, a QA engineer at Apple. And they talked about the new features, talked a little about the accessibility features in the new versions of iOS 13, macOS Catalina.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk to you about that because the Apple accessibility team, they're not returning my calls.
Yeah, do you have an in? can we?
You mean
can we
it's not
drop
just
your
me?
name?
That's
Have you
not
ever
just
had
you.
someone from there on your podcast before?
No, I've reached out to their media contacts and I've heard nothing back. So I'd love to get somebody on.
Yeah, it's because they heard you used Android at one point.
That's
Ryan.
right, probably.
They're just like, screw that guy. how many people are on the editorial team for AppleVis?
We have 7 members in our editorial team.
Wow. Okay, so it's a big team.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been with AppleVis?
I joined the site in March of 2013. I had been a regular viewer of the site. And by that point, I had been a fairly experienced Apple user, and I joined the editorial team in June of 2017.
Well, so of course, it's been a big couple weeks for you guys because of WWDC.
I knew you'd get it wrong.
Whatever. Listen, they need to rename that damn conference.
I was waiting for it.
WWDC, Whatwood District, Columbia. There you go.
That makes no sense. But okay, fine. Let's do it. So tell me, give us some of your impressions of what you thought about the big conference that they just had a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely bigger than the WWDC last year. I feel like it goes sort of a TikTok type thing. Last year with iOS 12, it was very much about refinement of existing features and stability and performance improvements, whereas this year they added a lot more new features in iOS and macOS. Those are the 2 operating systems that I use. I don't have an Apple Watch or an Apple TV, so I can't really comment on those.
Sure. Can you walk us through maybe sort of a few of the big features that they have announced for this year?
Well, on iOS, there is a new dark mode, and that is something that's been asked for a long time.
Right.
Not something that I would have use for, because I'm completely blind. But I can see for someone with low vision,
right,
or for aesthetic reasons, a person might like a dark mode.
Yeah, really important for reducing glare for people who are light sensitive.
Yes. Siri is getting some subtle text-to-speech improvements, they're calling it neural text-to-speech.
Really?
And apparently it's supposed to be better when reading longer sentences, longer passages of text.
Yeah, when they did the demo on
Reading
stage.
it more naturally, a little more. I don't know if you are Apple users yourselves, but a little like the Alex voice,
right,
that's built into Apple products, which is used for voiceover. The iPad, and this is interesting, something I didn't quite see coming, is it's getting a whole feature set of its own, and they're actually branching out into what they're calling iPad OS.
Really?
And my impression of it is that because iOS has been just iOS for as long as the iPhone and iPad have existed, that I'd imagine a lot of this is just marketing. I can't imagine the code base is substantially different. So I would hope that updates come out, at the same time for iOS as for iPad OS, and that developers don't have a huge task ahead of them of writing apps for a totally different operating system. Being the iPad.
Yeah.
I think it is going to be different because they're talking about adding USB support and mouse support, so they actually want to make it more of a productivity tool instead of just a media consumption tool.
Yes, and I think that's a way for them to sort of differentiate, because there's this conception of iOS as not being a particularly pro-friendly OS.
Right.
And so I think they're using iPad OS, the marketing cloud of that, to say, these are specific, distinct features that the iPad has, the iPhone doesn't, and to make a more professional experience. They're really trying to make the iPad shine.
Well, and I think too, with Apple making the move to an iPad OS and wanting it to become more of a productivity tool, I think they're trying to combat the whole Chromebook thing in education as well. You know,
the Chromebook, especially in education, you know, Apple held a fairly dominant position in the education market for a long time. You know, I think this was somewhat exemplified last year, March of 2018, when they held their, you know, special education focused event in Chicago. Problem is, there are other players now. Something like the Chromebook, it's cheap and very scalable for the type of things that schools are looking for. You know, with sometimes constrained budgets, it might make more sense for them, you know, from a broad sense, to get a Chromebook. Now, when you talk about accessibility, that's a different story. Because I find that Apple devices are more, from my limited use of Chromebooks, I found that Apple devices seem to be more intuitive when it comes to accessibility. I know Chrome OS is getting better. They're constantly improving Chromevox.
Yep.
But I think Apple, having, you know, spent a longer time in this space, has more going for it in terms of accessibility. But as far as their markets, like the education, for example, there are cheaper alternatives. You know, people don't necessarily need to get an iPad and stay in the Apple ecosystem for all these great features, when you can get something for, you know, for much cheaper.
Yeah, and, you know, the Chromebook has a keyboard built in. You know, you go with an iPad, now you need a keyboard or a case with a keyboard, and it's just multiple devices, and it'll be interesting.
Chrome OS is what's interesting about that is that it's a sort of the model, an OS based around a web browser.
Yeah.
And it's lightweight, it's fast. I definitely think, and they're improving Apple's improving keyboard support with the iPad, being able to make custom shortcuts.
So it sounds like they're making a lot of tweaks, definitely in places where they feel like they're sort of lagging behind. I mean, Siri is another good example of that. You know, I think that we can all agree that Siri could use
some work.
Yeah. I mean, certainly Apple needs to get Siri to the level that, you know, the Google and the Amazon devices are at. So, you know, and it's interesting that they've gone the quote neural route. You know, we've talked to Google developers here on the show, and you know, they're very much, you know, that AI is a huge component of the stuff that they're working on. So it sounds like Apple's really sort of taking some of that and trying to run with it as well. So, you know, it's interesting, you know, and this is why competition is good. You know, because all these different companies can look at what each other is doing and tweak their own products to sort of compete with each other in the marketplace. So, and it's all good news for us as consumers, because you know, they're improving upon what the other person's doing. So, you know, and especially in the accessibility space, you know, it's great to see that if it wasn't for Apple, we wouldn't have this accessibility arms race that we have between Microsoft and Google, which is really important, because it's making these products, you know, so much better.
Yes, because obviously before Apple, the idea of built-in accessibility out of the box was out of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to give them, you know, tons of credit for that. They really, you know, broke the seal on that. And they really are responsible for where we're at today, for sure. You know, but I think that part of the downside of that, part of the downside of Apple being so ahead of the game in terms of accessibility, is that they've kind of gotten to the point now where there's not a lot left for them to do in that space. And so I think to somebody from the outside, it kind of looks like Apple isn't really doing all that much accessibility wise these days, and that, you know, there's all this activity sort of at Microsoft and at Google, but really Microsoft and Google, they're playing a bit of catch up, and that's why, you know, there is all that activity, and, you know, Apple almost perfected the recipe. But that being said, what are some of the new accessibility features that they have been talking about for the new operating systems?
Well, most notably, and they talked about this in the keynote, is voice control.
Right.
You can control your Mac or your iOS device with your voice.
Wow.
This is primarily intended, my understanding is for people with motor and dexterity issues,
Sure.
where using a touchscreen or tapping would be impractical. So you can say something like, open mail, go home, scroll down, tap, delete. You can dictate text. So you're basically manipulating elements on the screen using your voice.
Yeah, that's nice.
That makes
It reminds me a little of, this is an old feature called speakable items. I think the basis for it actually came out back in 1993. And they worked on it a little for a while in early Mac OS 10, but it's been sort of deprecated. It's buried. It's in Mac OS accessibility settings, and the technology, the voice recognition, isn't as good as, say, what is used for Siri. So it's kind of fallen by the wayside. But this is sort of reminding me of what the intent of speakable items was, but more powerful.
Right.
Siri is, I view that as sort of an augmentation of a user experience, augmentation being provided it works, obviously,
Right.
to do what you want it to do, just can be a big if at times. But Siri, it's an intelligent personal assistant. It doesn't tend to replace the granular interaction you have with your OS, whereas voice control, it's a replacement of what you call traditional navigation,
Right.
like finger navigation. You can say much more granular commands like move right, move left, tap this, tap that, scroll, go home. And I haven't explored the full list of commands, but I understand you can do quite a lot. There are some others. Improved Braille table support on Mac OS. I'm not a Braille user, so I can't comment on that in practice, but I know they have mentioned that. There's a whole post on AppleVis, actually, where the accessibility features are listed for these new OSs. VoiceOver on Mac and iOS is getting punctuation customizations. You can customize how different punctuations groups is said. And I think this is sort of an answer to VoiceOver used to have 4 punctuation settings, all, most, some, or none. And in 2017, they got rid of the most setting. And people have been kind of unhappy about that. And so I think they're trying to sort of respond to that feedback. And so they made punctuation customization there.
Yeah, that's interesting to go back to and talking a little bit about the voice control. That is going to be something that's actually pushing, really like running the ball forward in that sense. They're the first to really look at that, and I think that's going to be a real breakthrough in the space because
they're not really the first to look at it.
Google has it as well to a certain degree.
That's the underlying technology behind Siri is developed by Nuance.
Yeah,
and Dragon Naturally Speaking Professional Edition always had that completely hands-free option. Now, granted, that's the PC world, but they have ported over to Mac versions now.
Yeah.
So that's a technology that I think Nuance understood pretty well, and it makes sense to port it over to that platform.
Yeah, well, for sure, but also, this, you got to remember, this is right out of the box. So, and what I think it was really going to make the difference with voice control is that there's a real appeal to mainstream as well. Mm-hmm. That's going to be super useful for people just on a daily basis, no matter who they are. Even, if your hands are full of groceries or something, or you're in the middle of doing something where you want
This could also allow them to go after the automotive sector as well.
Well, I was just going to say, remember our guest on last week's show was talking about in-car.
Yes, that's right.
And voice access. And
so this is a really smart move on their part. I think this is something that if they can really figure it out and have that baked in, that's a really big feature for the new phones going forward. So, whenever they have that, you have this AT that also it has a lot of mainstream potential as well. That's always something that really drives things forward. So, but I mean, I have heard that they have been working on this for a few years. Is this going to be in the next operating system for sure, or is this something that they're still working on?
Obviously, right now it's a beta, so it's always a work in progress. But it's there. It is in both iOS and macOS for people to test right now.
Nice.
It's at this point it's a developer beta, so it's not open to public testers yet. It will be at some point. Maybe when they can stabilize it a little bit. At which point it will go as a public beta. So there'll be some more testing, and then will come out in September.
Right.
That were pretty much the highlights. There were some other sort of more minor things, but I think voice control, punctuation, and Braille improvements were sort of the highlights.
Right.
So since you've been a Mac user for such a long time, was there anything exciting about the Mac that was announced other than, a $50,000 MacBook Pro?
Oh, there's that Mac Pro, and those specs are absolutely jaw-dropping. It's certainly not something I would get because, well, for one, I don't have the money for that, and two, I don't really have the CPU and the processing needs for a machine like that.
That's a totally spec'd out MacBook Pro. They're talking about, 24 core operating system and I don't know, 48 gigs of RAM.
I think 28. Was it 28 core or something?
Yeah, something ridiculous.
What would you need?
Yeah.
It's for Pixar.
It's hard to even, at least for me, it's hard to comprehend that level of speed.
Yeah, it's for Pixar and Lucasfilm and all these other creators. It's not for us,
Steve.
Yeah, for people in Hollywood maybe, or making movies,
exactly,
editing.
Yeah.
Yes, there's but I think what holds most potential about the Mac is in macOS Catalina. There is Project Catalyst, which was previously known as Marzipan, the ability to run iOS apps on the Mac. They started this a year ago with macOS Mojave. They added 4 of their own apps as a way to sort of prove the concept and test it in an early version of this effort. News, home, stocks, and voice memos. And this year, they are expanding so that iPad apps, the developer can go into Xcode, tick a box, and do some code refinements, and their app will run on the Mac.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what Google's been doing with Chromebooks and allowing them to run Android apps as well.
And I think they're trying to make it so that I think the mobile app space seems like a more vibrant ecosystem than what's on the Mac, and so I think they're trying to bring some of that success to the Mac platform with the tools that they already have with the market leverage that they have.
So the other big thing that that the media really caught hold of was the announcement that iTunes, as it's been known for however many years, is going away.
Only on the Mac.
Well,
yes.
Okay,
thank the Lord.
But yeah, so talk to us a little bit about that, and tell us, give us a little bit of background and sort of what they announced.
So, iTunes is being broken up. Music is obviously holding Music, Apple Music, and library, and a user's music library, and it holds the same functions as far as playlists and smart playlists and disk burning and whatnot as iTunes. And then there's a TV app and a podcast app. And so each media has an app of its own now. And so you're not going through iTunes, because that was becoming quite cumbersome.
Well, it's funny when you think about it, and God knows why it took them this long to really figure out iTunes.
We're still trying to figure it out on Windows.
Yeah, well, and again,
Windows, I think it's sticking around.
It is. It is definitely sticking
that's
around.
That's going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, for them. Is they have this app that they're, supporting on Windows, but the Mac, they're doing something totally different.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be a challenge. And,
so device, I didn't see this coming, but device syncing, because people were wondering, with all the functions that iTunes has baked into it, what's going to happen, particularly with people who connect their devices to their computers. That's going to be handled now in the Finder. So it's not a separate app. It's happening right in the Finder, and it is the experience when you're actually doing it is pretty much exactly the same. Once you get into the interface, it's exactly the same as the iTunes sync interface.
Well,
you know how to sync your device through iTunes, you know how to sync your device through the Finder.
Right.
It's funny when you think about iTunes itself and the trajectory of this program. Here we had when iTunes was first developed, it was developed as a CD burning program at its very origin, and then slowly but surely as the
iPod changed the world.
As we got iPods, and then we got iPhones, they started just packing more and more stuff that iTunes had to do. Then it had to sync the phones. Then it had to deal with photos and video and all this syncing stuff. And it became this huge piece of bloatware. I think there was such a rush to add, these cool new features. Like if you think back to 2001, the iPod and the digital life, that they were pushing. And of course, then they had the music store in 03, movies and TV shows in around 05, 06. Of course, the iPhone comes out in 07, and they think, why reinvent the wheel? We got the continuity for Apple users of the iPod and the Mac, have it integrate with iTunes. And then, of course, the App Store a year later. So all that goes into iTunes. It becomes sort of a dumping ground. Yes,
It's more and more features, but at the same time, less and less user-friendly.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
Why you started to see iOS stop depending on iTunes as much for software updates and media consumption.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was an iPhone user for years, but that's one of the things that influenced my decision when my contract came up and I was looking at a new phone was, man, I just don't want to have to use iTunes anymore. I hate it. I hate using it to sync everything. I just want to be able to plug my phone in and just treat it like a normal, file explorer window on my PC. I want to just be able to just drag and drop stuff back and forth on my phone. I want that functionality. I want to be able to upgrade the amount of storage I have. There was a few, but iTunes was just so central at that. Every time I plugged my iPhone in, I would just get agita because I'd just be like, it's, you never knew it was going to happen. And then when they started doing things like, you'd plug it in and it would go in and look at your library, your music library, and delete stuff.
Yeah, that made me mental. A lot of the warnings were like, you plug it in and I'd say would you like to erase the, you have to sync but to sync you have to erase because it's the media infrastructure versus the power of devices now hold a lot more than media. But of course, when that syncing, the original framework was designed, it was for the iPod. So, and that became ever more dissonant.
Yep.
With the advances that were being made on the devices that iTunes was sort of supporting.
Right.
And like for me, the only time I ever connected my current iPhone to iTunes was when I got it at first. I set it up on the device itself, but then I synced some media from my computer. But in the future, I consume media differently than I did when I got my phone.
Sure.
And so I don't think I'll be plugging my iPhone into my computer.
Yeah, and you don't really need to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's really changed a lot since I had the phone. So they've, so I'm sure that, that had to have been such a common complaint that they got.
And iTunes is one of those things that even when it was, more simple and that it had less features, like less bloatware, it's always been a sort of frequent butt of criticism by Apple users, just because it's being poorly designed, confusing.
Yeah.
And, they tried rewriting it. They tried with iTunes 11 back in 2012. They tried rewriting it, and it got a facelift. But ultimately, I think the problem was just that it did too much. And I think Craig Federighi mentioned this at the keynote, where he sort of joked about, well, of course we can do calendar on iTunes. Well, Safari, we can do that too. And as far as how to do this, well, of course we'll have a dock, sort of alluding to the feature creep that have been going on for several years.
And I think that's another thing that, some of us, like, because I've started off on iPhone and then went to Android. I'm back on iOS now. But one of the things I really wish would happen is that I could choose my default web browser. Instead of having Safari be the default for everything, I want to use Chrome or I want to use Firefox, and you can't set your defaults. Yeah, it lets you install them, so why not let us choose it as default? Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, that is a bit of an odd choice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like third-party keyboards. For a long time, you could not use a third-party keyboard out of a dedicated app.
Right.
But I think they've been trying to sort of open up that slowly, because they see that if they're gonna, talk the talk about pro users, they're gonna have to walk the walk. Eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're getting a lot of competition in a lot of different areas that they've never had. So
it's like Siri, I think, was one of those examples where it came out. It was one of the first, sort of, if you will, latest generation intelligent personal assistants. And this came out back in 2011, and it came out and sort of took the world by storm. And I don't know if they really knew what to do with it. But it put the concept in people's head and in competitors' heads, so that they were able to see the strengths and weaknesses of Siri, work off that, and find a number of very practical uses for their own products.
Well, and I think it'd be really interesting if we could do a survey of all the iOS users out there and ask them what apps they have on their phone. And, probably like me, I've got Google Chrome, I've got Google Maps, I've got the Google Assistant all on my iPhone because they just work better.
Yeah.
Apple Maps is okay, but it's not Google Maps. Siri's okay, but it's not the Google Assistant. So I'd like to make my iOS an Android phone.
Yeah, and I think part of the dilemma also is that Siri doesn't collect the same level of data that, say, Google and Amazon might have to base its AI. And Apple PR has said that AI, and when they have executives do interviews, that AI versus privacy is a false choice. But it definitely seems like there is, a substantial AI weakness when it comes to Siri.
But I mean, do you get the sense these days that Apple is a little bit of a different company today than it was maybe even just 5 years ago? My sense is that they're a little bit more open to change than they used to be, because I think that they are feeling a lot of pressure in the marketplace. I think that they do see a lot of other manufacturers coming up right behind them, and they don't have the market shares that they used to be. So they're a little bit more open to innovation or altering their core philosophies to sort of to compete better with some of these other companies. Is that the sense that you get, or am I crazy?
Yes, I think the market dictates that Apple really open up and see what their competitors are doing, because it gets to a point where you get phones and Macs and PCs, the general PC field, and of course wearables. There comes a time where the markets become so saturated that it's harder to come up with the next big thing, the next big new feature. So it's really the improvements when you compare, year to year in, say, 2017, 2018, 2019 versus when you think 2007 when the first iPhone came out, and then, a year later with the introduction of the App Store. The app, that was a revolutionary change.
Right.
You can only have so many of those with a given, class of technology. There comes a time when all the improvements, it's incremental. One company does it,
right.
The others, see that there's, some user demand for that,
sure.
And they'll copy it in one way or another.
That's right.
Well, and you wouldn't have seen normally.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more evolutionary at this point, because I think the market's becomes saturated enough that Apple doesn't have the same hegemony.
That's right.
That they used to.
Well, and I think from everything I watched most of the WWDC presentation and read a lot of things afterwards, and one of the probably biggest and best presentations at that conference was the Microsoft Minecraft presentation. It wasn't that long ago where Apple wouldn't have had Microsoft on the stage. Yeah,
I honestly don't know. I feel like they're in a better space now. I mean, they may not think so, but I think that as a company and as a consumer looking in, I think that them being more open to opening things up a little bit more and not being such a closed platform is going to be better for the consumer in the long run, and I think it'll be better for Apple in the long run, because the way that they were going, being so closed off, I mean, I felt like it was only a matter of time before that was going to start to really bite them in the butt, and I think it did. I think that a lot of people got fed up and jumped ship. But I mean, listen, now that iTunes is gone, I'll be honest with you. Well, listen, but hey, like that's a start.
And I think one of the biggest challenges now, of course, is price. The fact that the flagship phones are so expensive. Are they going to start feeling the pinch? If Samsung and other companies can make flagship phones that are cheaper.
Google released the Pixel 3a for $399.
Like, even they were talking about in the presentation, something like the Mac Pro, the stand for the display was an extra $1,000.
Yeah, just for a stand.
And I've yet to see the sort of what justifies that price point.
I think it has wheels
for a display stand.
No, it actually stands.
Being an extra $1,000.
It'll walk to you and put the screen at an optimal viewing angle for you.
Yeah, it's crazy. But again, who is their market? I mean, I understand that there's got to be sort of a top end manufacturer to everything. But I think that you got to give consumers options. And have they not? They have started doing that, right? Like there are mid-range phones.
Well, there was the iPhone SE, which was discontinued, but I think we're going to see it again later this fall when the new models come out, because they have to compete.
If they make a new SE or something, maybe based on the form factor of the iPhone 8 with updated components, I think that would go a ways.
Well, they have to.
Giving options to consumers.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the Google Pixel 3a came in at like $399 US. So there's no need to buy a $1,000 phone anymore.
Yeah.
Did you find it interesting, Tyler, that they didn't announce or really talk about their streaming service that's being launched this fall?
Oh, TV Plus.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
They didn't mention it at all. But maybe it's not really a developer thing. Maybe if they're not really.
Yeah, maybe
they're not really actively working on it. I mean, the platform's probably already done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they obviously with this push into services, there's a TV Plus and Apple Arcade that's coming in the fall. Apple Card is coming this summer. Those things to me don't sound particularly exciting.
No.
Just because I think there are others in the space they're entering a competition, and I don't know how it's going to work out for them long term, unless they have some really good, unless they have some really good quality content, or find ways to make it competitive for users, considering that there's Netflix and Hulu and everyone else.
There's too many choices
operating
now.
in that area.
Disney's this fall.
One thing that I did read that is good news, especially for us, is that on the Apple Podcast app, which is one of these three branched off apps from iTunes, they're going to be able to index all the words on each podcast so that the searchability of podcast is going to be greatly improved.
Yeah. How is that supposed to work?
I don't know.
I know they talked about that a little on the keynote, but how does that? Do you know how that works in practice?
No
idea. How
idea.
That's going to work? Are they planning it to work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. Again, I'd love to Ryan to be able to get somebody on to talk, even just to talk about that, because that's fascinating, because that's pretty like next level usability.
Well, I would almost think it's kind of like, when you upload your podcast or whatever audio file to YouTube and you turn on the closed captions, it starts putting all those words up on screen, right? So it's almost like live transcription, I would assume.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
it's probably something like that.
Another interesting feature is they've taken the Find My Friends and Find My iPhone apps, consolidated it into one, Find My.
Yeah, stupid name.
And there's this new feature, and again, this is something that they talked about, and I don't know like exactly how it will work in practice. If it'll be, I think it's promising, but obviously I need to see when there are more devices running these operating systems. Like where you can find a device even when it's offline via Bluetooth beacons and anonymous crowdsourcing, and if that works, if that works out for them, that could hugely improve the usefulness of Find My Mac, because if you leave your Mac somewhere, if you lose it and it's not on Wi-Fi at the current time, Find My Mac is only good if for a device that's on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Well, I think even, possibly for missing persons, if somebody goes missing, and even if the phone is turned off, you're still going to be able to ping it, supposedly. So it could be interesting.
Wait, is that even if the phone is turned off, it's actually turned off? They're still
that's kind of what I got from that presentation. Now, I could be totally wrong on that, but supposedly it's still kind of in a hibernation mode where it's still...
You mean I have to take my victims out beyond cell range now?
Sorry.
That's right.
Oh, man.
Yep.
Damn it.
So, like I said, I could be wrong, but it is interesting technology for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I was reading a whole thing about the cryptography that's involved in this, because it's a very delicate balance, because when you're leveraging so many devices and making sure that the only this information, only so much information goes up, and who has access to that information. I read it's a pretty sophisticated algorithm, and I'm sure there are many more people who can talk more about the details of cryptography than myself. But that, just reading it, sounded fascinating.
Yeah,
like what's
absolutely.
involved in actually making at least because it had been talked about in the more theoretical circles for some time, but they're saying the first time it's been applied on, a practical commercial scale.
Well, if at all possible, Tyler, if you can reach out to the guys you had from the Apple accessibility team and maybe put us in contact with them, we'd love to get them on the show.
Just tell them Ryan's gone back to using an iPhone now, so he wants back into the club.
What made you change back from Android?
Being able to double tap and answer a call for the most part, instead of having to search around and find the answer button on my Android phones. Other than that, Android did all the same things my iPhone did, so. Yeah,
that's one of those, you could say it's one of those serious bugs that you find, or, things that are lacking in one operating system that can, because now that, that accessibility has improved so much in recent years, that consumers, AT consumers have more of, of a choice.
Yep. And it's just
kind of like Mac and Windows, like, even something like Narrator has gotten better on Windows.
That's right.
Yep.
And continuing to. Yeah.
I mean, I still use NVDA because I think a third-party screen reader, just again because more time in the space, more time to perfect their game.
Cool. Well, listen, Tyler, we want to thank you so much for taking this time out of the day and brushing us up what's going on with Apple.
So, Tyler, why don't you tell us where people can find AppleVis online?
Well, the AppleVis website, applevis.com, Twitter @AppleVis, and of course on Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, my friend, and let's have you on next year, and we'll talk more WWDC.
And of course, you can find me on Twitter at TDS0615. That's T as in Tango, D as in Delta, S as in Sierra, 0615.
All right. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So I while we were doing this, I looked up the specs of that new Mac
Oh, it's
Pro.
crazy. Yeah.
So up to 28 core Intel Xenon processors, up to 1.5 terabytes of ECC RAM, up to 4 terabytes of SSD storage, up to AMD Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo graphics with 64 gigabytes of HBM2 memory, 8 PCIe expansion slots, the new monitor. The frame of the new box has an aluminum housing that lifts off for 360-degree access to the whole system. It also includes a lattice pattern, which has been referred to as a cheese grater to maximize airflow.
Yep.
Their new display is a 32-inch 6K monitor with P3 wide color gamut and true 10-bit color support, 1600 nits of peak brightness, a 1 million to 1 contrast ratio, and a super wide off-axis viewing angle. And then the new MacBook Pro is going to start at $6,000 US.
Yeah.
The display is going to be $5,000 US, and then the stand is going to be
$999 or something.
$999. Yeah, $1,000 for the stand.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say what the big deal about the stand is. But there's got to be more to it than just.
That's what a lot of people are debating. They don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
That's insanity.
Yeah. But it's not bad. A computer starting at $6,000 all the way up to $50,000. So.
Yeah, but $5,000 for the monitor.
Yeah. But that's a hell of a monitor by the sound of it.
6K, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. 8K's a thing.
Oh, yeah. 8K's out now.
Is it?
Yeah, Samsung's got a bunch of 8K stuff out on the market now.
Damn,
Which is bizarre because TV's not even broadcasting in 4K yet.
Well,
some of it is.
Some of it is, but not much.
No.
Oh, man, I need to upgrade my TV, clearly.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Better get up to 8K, Rob.
Yeah. Yeah, 8K a month. That's what I need to make.
Can we?
That would be good, eh?
What else to say about that? I'm so happy to hear that they have killed iTunes. I mean, I wish they would do it on Windows.
On the Mac.
I'm told it's on Mac.
You got to keep saying on Mac.
Well, yeah. Obviously, the change to Windows can't be all that far behind. I mean, it must be in the works.
I hope so.
Unless they just don't care about Windows users and they're just like, you know what, you guys can just suffer with iTunes.
Yeah, I don't know.
At some point,
it'll change or go away.
But man, that program. It was the bane
of our existence
yeah,
for years.
The bane of many people's existence. I'm sure a lot of people are really pleased to see it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only wish I could have killed it with fire.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, yeah. Yeah, anytime that I'd have anything that I'd want to sync to my phone, I'd be like, okay, well, here goes a half an hour of my life. Because, you know, you plug it in, it wouldn't detect the phone, or maybe it did, or then it gave you some sort of cryptic error, like, yeah, you want to sync? Well, I have to erase everything. It's like, well, wait, no. On what? What do you delete? What? No, don't delete anything. Just, I want to add 3 songs. That's it. Ugh, awful. I do not miss those days.
Yep.
But this voice access too, I think that has some real potential there. I'm excited to hear that's really,
you should go back
really moving forward.
If you haven't seen the demo, you should go back and watch it because it's pretty cool.
And you know, I feel like that's really going to take off, and I think that obviously we're going to see some movement on all the other platforms as well, with people trying to catch up. I'll bet.
Well, again, you know, going back to the in-car thing, you know, hands-free, you know, control your phone, text, email, listen to music.
Yep.
You know.
Well, and you know, and people with mobility issues, with physical access issues, you know, that's going to be huge. They're going to be able to use their phone just as easily as, you know, people with Parkinson's or any sort of, you know, that would have trouble, you know, using the gestures. Could be a real game changer there.
Yeah, could be very helpful for a lot of people for sure.
Yep. Okay, well there we go. That was our Apple show. Now we are off the hook for another year, eh? Until the next WWDC.
I'd like to dedicate this to our devoted listener, Allie.
This one's for you, Allie. Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email if they so desire at cowbell@atbanter.com.
That was a good hit today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know where else they can find us?
No, I don't. I have no clue.
Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, I've heard that.
That's right. And apparently there's some limited exposure on Instagram, but
Yeah, we're working on it.
I wouldn't go there.
No, don't listen to him. Go there. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks again to Tyler Steven for joining us, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com, or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840, or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.